Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or The Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in-depth into my top 30 wide receiver rankings and tiers for week number 8 of the 2022 fantasy football season. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. And if you do want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. I would also like to ask that if you guys have any questions about week number 8, to never hesitate and to ask down below in the comment section. And if I don't answer down there, make sure that you check out our brand new Discord linked in the pinned comment and in the video description. So without further ado, let's get into my top 30 wide receiver rankings and tiers for week number 8 of the 2022 fantasy football season. We begin with tier number 1 at the wide receiver position. All 6 of these wide receivers in this tier are must-start players this week, regardless of the matchup. You don't want to overthink things. You want to be starting all of these players. At number 1, we have Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins, going up against the Detroit Lions in Detroit, currently in half PPR. Tyreek Hill is the number 3 wide receiver on the season. They're going up against the Detroit Lions this week, and the Lions have a piss-poor defense. I think Tua Tagovailoa and Tyreek Hill are going to take advantage big time in this game and elevate Tyreek Hill to become the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football on the week. At number 2, we move to Stefon Diggs of the Buffalo Bills, going up against the Green Bay Packers. On the year, Stefon Diggs, despite having a bye in week number 7, he is still the number 1 wide receiver in all of fantasy football. Now, they get the Packers in prime time on Sunday Night Football this week, and even though this might end up being a blowout because of how the Packers looked up against the Washington Commanders, the Buffalo Bills don't stop beating the dog shit out of the other team. They don't just go, hey, let's run the ball, let's get out of here. No, they continue to push on the gas and keep throwing a million times. I think Stefon Diggs could also be the number 1 wide receiver at the end of the week. I love this matchup for him. At number 3, we have Cooper Kupp of the LA Rams going up against the San Francisco 49ers. Now, despite the fact that Matthew Stafford and this LA Rams team as a whole has been an unmitigated fucking disaster this season, Cooper Kupp has still been dominating in fantasy football, and he's currently the number 2 wide receiver in fantasy football. Through 6 games, because he was on bye in week number 7, he was a top 6 wide receiver in 4 of 6 games. Last time they played up against the Niners, this man had 19 targets. It wouldn't surprise me if he saw 15 plus targets in this matchup. I love Kupp up against the Rams. Next up, we got Davante Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans. Last week, up against the Texans, Davante Adams definitely was a bit underwhelming. 9 targets, 8 receptions, 95 receiving yards, 14 fantasy points, wide receiver number 17. Now, this was only 1 of 2 games on the year through 6 games where Davante Adams didn't score a touchdown. I think he hops back on the saddle and has a good performance this week up against the Saints. Next up, we move to Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings going up against the Arizona Cardinals at home in Minnesota. The Minnesota Vikings were on bye last week, and even with that said, he is still the number 5 wide receiver in all of fantasy football. This matchup up against the Arizona Cardinals could be incredibly high scoring and a tit-for-tat back-and-forth affair, as long as Kyler Murray wasn't up too late on Saturday night grinding out the new Modern Warfare 2. So hopefully Justin Jefferson is able to get a back-and-forth game with the Cardinals, because that could really elevate Justin Jefferson as well as DeAndre Hopkins, who we're going to be talking about in a couple of minutes. Next up, we move to Jamar Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals going up against the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland to close out tier number 1 at the wide receiver position. Now, it does appear that Jamar Chase is on the injury report on Thursday, but what I know about the injury reports this season is that nothing matters until Friday. Once you see that they're not participating on Friday or they're limited, that's when it's time to panic. But on Monday through Thursday, practice reports don't mean anything. So last week, Jamar Chase was the number 1 receiver. The week before that, he was also the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football, so you better believe he could do it again in prime time on Monday Night Football up against the Browns. The Browns defense has definitely not been what a lot of people would have thought they would have been going into the season. Now, I'm not saying there's some type of a dumpster fire, but I think Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow could have a good spot here, so I definitely like Jamar Chase. Now we move to tier number 2 at the wide receiver position, headlined by D-Hop, DeAndre Hopkins of the Arizona Cardinals going up against the Minnesota Vikings. Now, in DeAndre Hopkins' return game from being suspended from having used PEDs last year, he finished as the wide receiver number 10 in half PPR, 14 targets, 10 receptions, 103 yards. Again, this week he gets the Vikings. I really think this could be an incredibly high-scoring matchup, kind of like what we saw with the Arizona Cardinals and the New Orleans Saints last week. So I'm very excited about the upside of DeAndre Hopkins and was definitely flirting with the fact that he could be a tier 1 wide receiver. Next up, we move to CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys going up against the Chicago Bears at home in Jerry's World. Now, again, with tier number 2 wide receivers, you also don't want to be overthinking things. These are all guys you want in your lineup, assuming that they're all good to go on Sunday. Now, we have seen kind of an up and down roller coaster ride of CeeDee Lamb this season. And with Dak Prescott back, they actually didn't look to throw the ball at a crazy high clip like I thought they would last week up against the Lions. Though with that said, I still think CeeDee Lamb is an incredibly reliable wide receiver, currently wide receiver 15 in half PPR. Maybe the bad games are behind him, and he's going to start having much better games going forward. And this matchup up against the Bears definitely seems enticing, despite the fact that they looked really good, the defense up against the Patriots. Next up, we got number 9, Jalen Waddle away, waddle, till the very next day, bump, up against the Detroit Lions. Now, Jalen Waddle came out of this season on fucking fire. It's like he was shot out of a cannon. Wide receiver 15, 422. And then things went wrong, right? Once we stopped seeing 2 under center, wide receiver 59, 77, 16 last week up against the Steelers, wide receiver 27. But the Steelers have a pretty strong defense. Again, they're not the best defense in the NFL, and the Dolphins' game plan really didn't work after the first quarter. But hey, it is what it is. This week, they get the Lions. Again, the Lions defense is complete and utter dog shit. I expect a huge bounce back performance out of Jalen Waddle, and wouldn't even be surprised if he outscored Tyreek Hill this week. At number 10, we move to A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, A.J. Brown has been relatively consistent this year outside of week number 5, where his wide receiver 69. Very nice. I like. Well, Borat might like it, but I didn't like it if he was in my fantasy lineup. Currently, the wide receiver 16 in half PPR. This Philadelphia Eagles team is incredibly legit. Their next couple games schedule is incredibly easy after the Steelers. They got the Texans, the Commanders, the Colts, the Packers. These are games where A.J. Brown might Cleveland steamer the defense. I like Brown in this spot. Obviously, there are going to be down games when you have wide receivers around you like Devontae Smith and wide receiver or tight ends like Dallas Goedert. But at the end of the day, you got to have A.J. Brown ranked high every single week. At number 11 to close in tier number 2, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown, the sun god of the Detroit Lions. He's expected to play in week number 8, gets banged up. Not with a concussion, but they ruled him out because of the new concussion protocols. He should be good to go this week. The Dolphins defense is banged up. I do worry slightly if Amon-Ra St. Brown is being shadowed by Xavier Howard, but I don't think the Dolphins are even going to end up doing that. So I think Amon-Ra St. Brown should have a bounce back spot here this week up against the Finns defense. At number 12, we move to Titty Boy Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals going up against the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. Now, very similar to Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, it would not surprise me at all if T. Higgins outscored Jamar Chase this week. Shouldn't be a surprise any week. We even saw Tyler Boyd have a fantastic game last week, and that is because the Bengals offensive line has really stepped up and Joe Burrow has looked significantly better. Higgins is currently the wide receiver 22 in half PPR. He did miss week number 5 with an injury and was pretty awful in week number 1, but outside of that, he's been really solid, really reliable, so I definitely like him this week up against the Browns. At number 13, we have Deebo Samuel of the San Francisco 49ers going up against the LA Rams. Now, had he have not been playing the Rams this week, I would have been very nervous about Deebo Samuel because outside of that Rams game, where his wide receiver 5 in week number 4, he hasn't really done much. Wide receiver 28, 25, 39, 26, 22, 47. Now, I'm not here to tell you that Deebo Samuel is definitely a bust because maybe things can turn around coming out of the bye week. Maybe Christian McCaffrey's involvement really helps Deebo Samuel out. But right now, it's really hard to trust him, except for in a game up against the Rams, because I think Deebo Samuel is going to go absolutely insane in this matchup. At number 14, we have Chris Olave of the New Orleans Saints going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. On Sunday, Chris Olave has had 4 games in a row where he has finished inside of the top 20. And in one of those games, he got a concussion. Chris Olave has been playing amazing as a rookie. If you don't have him ranked inside the top 20, your process is completely wrong. This guy could definitely even move all the way up inside of the top 5. Andy Dalton will be under center yet again, which I don't love, but Chris Olave's been putting up numbers with them, so I guess it doesn't really matter. At number 15, we have Mike Evans. Now, I'm starting to panic about the Buccaneers offense, but I'm not really panicking about Mike Evans because he's still been fine throughout all of this bullshit. Last week up against the Panthers, 15 targets, 9 receptions, 96 receiving yards, 14 fantasy points, wide receiver 14.5 PPR. He even dropped a wide open fucking touchdown. Imagine how different that game might have been if he just caught that ball at the beginning of the game. Maybe they don't get the shit beat out of them by the Panthers. At the end of the day, though, that's just how shit goes, and he doesn't end up catching that ball. He has a decent fantasy game. I think this week, tonight, up against the Baltimore Ravens, he bounces back. At number 16, we have Gabe Davis of the Buffalo Bills. Now, Gabe Davis is kind of a up and down player, but I don't even know if we can describe him as a risky kind of a player because when he's been healthy, he's been dominant. Week 1, when he's healthy, wide receiver 12. Then he doesn't play in week 2. Then he comes back off the injury, wide receiver 66 and 86. But once he's healthy, wide receiver 1 against the Steelers, wide receiver 13 against the Chiefs. Now they had a bye week last week, so he's even more healthy. And now they get the Packers. Look, if you don't have Gabe Davis ranked inside of the top 16, I almost want to rank him higher. Again, just like with Chris Olave, it seems like you're not really thinking things through. I love Gabe Davis on this spot, and I hope he keeps performing well because once I have him ranked, like, in the next week or two inside the top 10, then I won't seem like a certified crazy person. Now we move to tier number 4 at the wide receiver position, but before we break that down, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our sponsor over at BetMGM. They've been on your screen this whole entire video. They're also on my hat. I know my hat's turned backwards. Here it is forward now. We'll flip it back around. So BetMGM has an offer for you guys that is going to expire in the next 2 weeks, so you need to make sure you take advantage of it right now. If you bet $10 on any pregame money line in the NBA tonight, you will win $200 in free bets as long as someone in the NBA makes a three-pointer tonight, which is guaranteed to happen. And guess what? Your pregame moneyline bet on any team in the NBA doesn't even have to fucking win, and they'll still give you the $200 in free bets. And also, you might be thinking, oh, Nick, I don't watch the NBA. That's okay, because your $200 in free bets can go onto the NFL. To activate this offer, you have to be a new user to BetMGM, and you have to sign up using the link in the video description or in the pinned comment. Make sure you guys check that out. Again, it's going to disappear relatively soon, and you want to take advantage when these books give you free money. So now we move to tier number 4 of the wide receiver position, headlined by Christian Kirk of the Jacksonville Jaguars going up against the Denver Broncos. Now, last week, if Christian Kirk ended up having BBL surgery like he's fucking Kim Kardashian in the offseason, then Christian Kirk would have scored a touchdown to win that game. But at the end of the day, Kirk has been pretty reliable to start the season. Then he kind of cooled down a bit weeks 4 through 6, but he started to rise again like my cock in the morning, and I fully expect Christian Kirk to have another solid performance this week up against the Broncos. But the problem is, why I can't have him ranked higher is because he's playing the Broncos in London. These London games typically suck donkey cock, plus the fact is that the Denver Broncos defense is really fucking good. So I think Christian Kirk will get it done on a volume standpoint, but I am a little bit worried about him because of the matchup. At number 18, we have Michael Pittman Jr. Now, Michael Pittman Jr. has been pretty hit or miss this season, but we all knew deep down that when this guy is healthy, he's going to see a shit ton of targets game in and game out from Matt Ryan. But now we take Matt Ryan out of the equation, and Sam Ehlinger is now the guy. Now, my thought process is if I was trying to put myself into the brain of Sam Ehlinger, what I would do if I was him is just force feed the ball to the best player on the offense, to throw the ball to the guy that even if it's not right next to him, he can go ahead and go up and get it, move to go get the ball. So I would be force feeding Michael Pittman. Now, is that what Sam Ehlinger is actually going to do? I'm not too sure. The Commanders' defense isn't the best, so I'm fine playing Michael Pittman and ranking him this highly, but let me tell you, I'm not as confident as I would have been even with Matt Ryan being pretty bad. At number 19, we have Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against the Ravens tonight. Now, again, just like I talked about earlier when I talked about Mike Evans, I wasn't too worried about Evans, but I am worried about this Buccaneers team. And when I'm saying worried about the Buccaneers team, I'm worried about Brady, and I'm worried about Chris Godwin. Because in my opinion, going into the year, if Chris Godwin was fully healthy, I genuinely think he would have been a second-round pick because he has top 5 wide receiver upside. But Tom Brady hasn't looked the best, and Chris Godwin hasn't looked the best but he's still getting a lot of targets. In week 6 against the Steelers, 12 targets. Last week up against the Panthers, 13 targets. So if you like to chase volume like DK Metcalf likes to chase down defenders after they pick off Russell Wilson, then Chris Godwin would appear to be a good start this week. The matchup against the Ravens is definitely enticing, but again, I'm still a little bit worried, which is why he's in tier number 4. At number 20, we have Tyler Lockett in my pocket skirt of the Seattle Seahawks going up against the Giants. Now, going into the last week, on Sunday, I really shifted my opinion on Tyler Lockett because he was banged up going into the game, and it seemed like they were going to put him on a snap count. Now, DK Metcalf got hurt, which kind of flipped things upside down like the life of fucking Will Smith in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but now we're a week from that injury. I think he's still banged up. He's still on the injury report, but he had 8 targets last week, 7 receptions, 45 yards, was the wide receiver 41. The Giants don't have the best defense ever. This game could be high scoring, so I think you still have to rank Lockett in this range. At number 21, we have Terry McLaurin of the Washington Commanders going up against the Indianapolis Colts. Now, like I said in last week's video, Carson Wentz being benched because he had to have surgery or whatever, blah, 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 is a huge positive for McLaurin because Heineke is very hit or miss. Heineke's willing to do the crazy shit that Carson Wentz is too much of a pussy to do. McLaurin will get triple covered, and Heineke will say, fuck it, McLaurin's out there somewhere, heave the ball to him. Now, that could result in McLaurin being like wide receiver 50 because he has like 9 targets, and none of them were catchable. But it also results in big games like we saw last week. 8 targets, 5 receptions, 73 receiving yards, a touchdown. This motherfucker didn't score a touchdown except for in week 1, and he scored 1 with Heineke. 16 fantasy points, wide receiver number 9. I am much more positive about McLaurin right now than I ever was with Carson Wentz. At number 22, we have George Pickens, and everyone in the fantasy community needs to start throwing respect on Pickens' name. On Fantasy Pros, the expert consensus rankings, where I put my rankings to do these rankings for the video, right now, Pickens is wide receiver 31 on there. That is bullshit. People are disrespecting this guy. From weeks 4 on, wide receiver 20, 22, 54, and 11. I know we started off the season not so hot, but Kenny Pickett loves to throw the ball to George Pickens. So why isn't he ranked higher? I don't fucking know. I love Pickens, and if he has another great game, we're going to have to keep moving him on up the rankings until maybe, just maybe, he's a top 12 guy in my rankings going forward. At number 23 to close out tier number 4, we have Amari Cooper of the Cleveland Browns going up against the Cincinnati Bengals in prime time. Now, to start off the season, things were kind of hit or miss for Amari Cooper, wide receiver 84, 10, 4, 90, 11, 24, and 32. Last week was his lowest amount of targets by far this season, except for week 4 up against Atlanta. He only had 4 targets, 3 receptions, but he turned that into 74 yards. So again, to reiterate, one bad spot or not so hot spot against the Ravens doesn't make me panic. I still like Cooper. I still think Brissett's a decent enough quarterback to have Amari Cooper ranked inside of tier number 4. Now we begin with tier number 5 here, and this is where things start to really go down the gutter. Now, Jakobi Meyers, I'm a big fan of him, but we don't really know the quarterback situation here for Jakobi Meyers. Is it going to be Mac Jones? Is it going to be the Zappinator Bailey Zappi? Now, again, I'm not too sure that has a huge impact on Meyers, but it has a huge impact on the game when you're fucking spit-swapping quarterbacks halfway through the game. Last week, he was the wide receiver 30. I still believe in Jakobi Meyers. I still feel like he's probably one of the safer bets in this group, but I can't feel super confident, especially going against the Jets. Sauce Gardner's probably going to be on Meyers. I definitely don't expect the biggest spot here out of Jakobi Meyers, just because the fact that, if Sauce Gardner is on him, I think he will struggle. At 25, we have Courtland Sutton, who got the sauce experience last week. He got sauced, as the announcer said. Last week, wide receiver 69, wide receiver 70 the week before. Currently wide receiver 27. The Jags defense has kind of been on a downward spiral, but we don't know who the quarterback's going to be. And even if it is Russell Wilson, is he like that much of a step up? Is he going to put a pep in Courtland Sutton's step? I don't know, man. This has been a tough scene for Courtland Sutton. I really liked him going into the season, but this quarterback thing has really derailed him. Quarterback, or wide receiver 26, I should say, Romeo Doubs of the Green Bay Packers going up against the Buffalo Bills. Now, the reason why I have him ranked so high is because Allen Lazard's arm is in a sling. Now, again, it's only Thursday, so the injury report on Friday will be a little bit more telling, but do I really feel like Lazard's going to play? Right now, the answer is no. So if he doesn't play, then Dupes has to step up. They don't really have too many options to throw the ball to. They're probably going to be playing from the back, hitting it from the back. How you like that? Up against the Bills. And thus, they're going to have to throw the ball a lot, and I think Dubes will benefit from that. 27, we have Devontae Smith. With A.J. Brown being there, it definitely makes Devontae Smith a little bit more hit or miss. Looking at his game log, wide receiver 133, 30, 1, 73, 15, 20. So he's pretty boom or bust. I'm fine playing him against the Steelers. Again, the Steelers don't have this world beater defense, but if A.J. Brown wasn't there, this really could have been a banana lands year for Devontae Smith, where he might have been like a top 5 wide receiver, if I'm being honest with you. Wide receiver 28, we got Deontay Johnson. I honestly thought maybe we should throw Deontay Johnson in tier 6 because he hasn't been that good, but he keeps seeing volume. 10, 7, and 13 targets in the last 3 games. He hasn't been that efficient, but if the team continues to throw him the ball, eventually a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while, and maybe Deontay Johnson finds that nut in week number 8 up against the Eagles, though again, I will warn, this is kind of a tough matchup. And by kind of, I mean a really tough matchup, because the Eagles look like they have the best fucking defense in the NFL. Now moving into the final tier at the wide receiver position, we have tier number 6 with DJ Moore and Adam Thielen. I'll also kind of expound slightly on some other guys that aren't inside of the top 30, but I think you could consider to potentially finish inside the top 30. So DJ Moore last week had a come up, right? He's been down bad all year. It was really bad, right? He's wide receiver 41 right now. He was wide receiver 8 last week, 69 receiving yards. Very nice. I like. 1 touchdown. Looked really good. 10 targets. I think he's going to keep getting targeted with PJ Walker. The Atlanta Falcons defense is hot garbage, so hopefully Moore steps up in this game, but I'm still worried because PJ Walker is his quarterback. Number 30, Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen continues to get targets. The question is, how beneficial are those targets? If this game ends up being a shootout, then Thielen might be an absolute fucking smash here. But if this ends up being a game where maybe the Vikings, there's always those games during the year, typically in prime time, where the Vikings don't actually show up, like they don't play well. I think Thielen's going to be fine going forward. Wide receiver 65, 54, 17, 25, 68, 18. Currently wide receiver 38. Seems like he's on the right path. But again, it's always kind of hard to trust the other wide receiver on a team when they have Justin Jefferson, who could just get every target, score 1 million points, and then Thielen's kind of just left kind of like a cuck watching from the side. Also, wide receivers to note, Brandon Ayuk, wide receiver 31, Tyler Boyd 32, Brandon Cooks 33. If Lazard plays, he would be elevated up into kind of the start-worthy scenario. And then Rashad Bateman as well, an interesting, very much hit or miss play. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below as well as hitting that like button. It would help me out a ton. If you do want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. Please make sure you check out BetMGM and check out that offer I talked about earlier. Bet $10 on any pregame NBA money line, and then you'll receive $200 in free bets if someone makes a 3-pointer in the NBA tonight, which is guaranteed to happen. Make sure you click on the link in the video description down below or in the pinned comment to activate that offer. Also, check out our brand new Discord. Talking fantasy football in there. Make sure you guys sign up for that. Link to that also in the description. Love you guys so much. And as always, have a great guys' day. Goodbye!